Mm-hmm.
You sold your soul to Satan, your grace.
Really?
You accused
You're going to do this to
innocent
me
men of
again?
witchcraft and let them die.
I'm not even...
Friar, you would not strike a fellow man of the cloth. No, I wouldn't. In fact, I'll help you pack for your journey. You're going to need lots of gold to help you on your way to... You're very rich. And now, here's 30 pieces of silver to pay the devil on your way to hell.
Okay. What you couldn't see, this is from Kevin Costner's Robin Hood. And Friar Tuck's a little worked up. And the bishop is loading his pockets, getting ready to head out of town, and he is corrupt and he is bad. But this is one of the things that the media has portrayed the church as, is money hungry. And it's one of the things that we know, if we're versed in the Bible at all, that we are not to be. To the point where one of the qualifications for elders that is given to Timothy, Paul lines out, he says, they are not to be literally philargyros. Phileo, Philadelphia, love, brotherly love, okay? Fondness, literally it's fondness for silver, argyros. Not to be silver lovers, and silver was money, okay? So we know that that's not the case, but the way it's been portrayed is, money grubbers. Every time I went to church when I was a kid, they're always begging for money. They're always digging in their pockets. And some churches actually keep track of your tax records, and you don't maintain good standing with the church. One of them is a major cult, actually, in our area. So it sort of makes sense. If you haven't paid your 10% of your gross, you can lose your good standing with the church. They keep track of it. So I understand where the stuff comes from, but is that actually fair? Okay. Are we all money grubbers? Now, those of you who are regulars here, you know that we actually don't talk about money very much, even though we've got the active building fund thing going on with dreams of what God will do with the lot next door that he's provided over across the highway. But yes, absolutely, those are praise. Money's a tool. It's just a tool. But it is something that God spoke about with some frequency. In fact, great frequency. Some argue that it's discussed more than any other topic in the Bible. That is debatable. That depends on how you approach it. But it doesn't matter who's in the lead. The fact is, it's something God never shied away from. Money is a medium of exchange. It's supposed to maintain its value over time. That's questionable when you look at currencies, what we have. That's why, gold and silver, things like that are considered more money over a long period of time. The currencies that we use, they decline in value. But we trade our lives for it. Money represents your time. It represents your sweat, your labor. Okay, this is economic fact. And that's one of the reasons why it's kind of an important thing. Because we trade our lives for it, and what we do with it is important. But it's even more important because all of the money that I manage actually belongs to whom? Yeah. There's the real reality that C.S. Lewis talked about, the fact that it was like a small child asking Daddy for tuppence so that they could get him a birthday present, a little something. And Daddy's delighted to do it because the heart's right. Okay? That's the reality. Everything that I've got, whether you belong to God or not, whether you're born again, whether you've placed your faith in Jesus Christ or not, everything you've got is God's. You just should understand that once you belong to Jesus. Are we all money grubbers? Boy, I hope not. I hope that God gives us that good, healthy view of giving, who it belongs to, what the real purpose of it is. Because as was already alluded to today, as part of our worship, because it is part of our worship, our giving, every dollar that I part with the right heart, is a vote of confidence in God. I'm saying, God, I can't, but you can. And as managing your stuff, in this case your money, no different than in managing the life that you've given me, our most valuable resource, our most limited resource, time. Yeah, all these things, they're all represented by what do we do with it and what's the heart behind it. But with giving financially, it's a vote. Every one of those dollars is a vote that it all came from you, Father, and I do believe that you're going to meet all of my needs. And in the meantime, what can we do with your money, God? We get to play Santa Claus. That's the real issue. So, why are we dealing with this? Go back there. Because chapter 16, 1 Corinthians, if you're not open there already, please get there. Okay? And my clock, hopefully I won't get distracted, because along with the clock that I got from Zeb, there's a homely little girl on there. Can you not see? Oh, there. Yeah. All right. Chapter 16. We have completed, sadly, the section of the letter that was dealing with the resurrection. Okay. I'd kind of like to go back to chapter 15, but we'll move on. Now, about the collection for God's people. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up, so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. If it seems advisable for me to go also, they will accompany me. All right. So, first of all, we're looking at this fragrant offering, this collection for God's people, just the first half of verse 1. And it's important for us to understand that giving, we're not going to delve heavily today into tithes and offerings. Tithe, just an old English word for tenth, for 1/10. Historically, Old Testament-wise, that was the king's portion. A king or one that was held to be a superior. Look at Melchizedek. In Genesis, Abraham coughed up 10%. He didn't give anything to the other kings that requested it, who he was concerned could stomp him into the dirt. And humanly speaking, they could have, except where God was concerned. He wouldn't give them anything. But Melchizedek, he gave a tenth. Why? Because he was not just the king of Salem. He knew that he was something more. And that has been the king's portion. We are not under the law. And so even though there's some that still argue, well, there's the tenth that we give no matter what, and that goes to the church, and then the offerings are over and above, that can go other, well, maybe. But the principle, we need to keep a more general principle in mind, because we're not under the law. And that doesn't mean, as my father-in-law, he shocked me with this, okay, when I was dating Cheryl. Because I learned, some of you, I've told you this before, my parents taught me how to save. You did not frivolously splatter it around. And from a very early age, got the little savings account down at Parma. When a passbook savings account paid 5.5%, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, when I like that back. You saved your nickels, your dimes, your pennies, your dollars as you got, or you saved. Spend, what is that? And then when this concept hit me as a new believer, people are saying, well, I'm like, what are you doing with your money? What's the check? You're doing this offering? Well, we're giving. Give? What's that? Okay. It's an important concept. It's a huge concept. And we do need to understand that it is part of our worship. It is something that we decide between God. We'll look over that in a couple of minutes. It is between us and God, every one of us. And that includes vocational ministers. Okay? We're not excluded. It's the same. There is no difference. It is not patronage. Patronage is when you just support someone. Check out the long-term effects to a great extent of the welfare system since the 60s. Ask those in the black community particularly. They were like a beta test group. It really looks like. And what has happened? That's patronage. An idea of koinonia fellowship, of sharing with those in need so that they can get back on their feet, or those who cannot support themselves, who genuinely are in need, and that we're not supporting bad behavior, that we're not encouraging sin, that we're not funding evil. Okay? We have that opportunity to keep track of how are things spent. What are they being spent on? What is best for this family, for this individual? With the whole idea of, and in Ephesians it actually says this, when it's talking about the picture of taking off the old self, being made new by God, and then putting on the new self. And it says, those that have been stealing, well, knock it off. Take that off, like that old garment. Take that off. But once you're made new in your mind, once Christ is doing that work, then all of a sudden there's something different, because he doesn't just say, don't steal anymore. He says, get a job. Work with your hands so you've got something to give to those in need. Okay? So the one that is in need today can be the provider tomorrow. So that this is not patronage. It's not welfare as such. God's system is much more thorough. And it doesn't keep people down. It doesn't make them dependent. It raises them up and makes them participants. It is proof of love. Okay? In 2 Corinthians, don't turn there yet, but 8 and 9 are dealing with a collection, in fact, much more thoroughly than our passage today. And the last verse in chapter 8 in 2 Corinthians, verse 24 says, therefore, show these men, the ones that are part of collecting these gifts to take to the needy. Therefore, show these men the proof of your love and the reason for our pride in you, so that the churches can see it. What he's saying there is, give what you said you'd give, because it shows your love. It's a tangible part of it. But it is private. It is a matter of the heart. It is not, oh, I have to give so that God won't strike me dead. I guess I better give because that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, that's great. If you get a gift, let's put that in big quotes, okay? A gift like that from someone, from a human, what does that do for your excitement about what you've received? Here, I guess I'm supposed to give this to you. You know, here's a couple of $100. Yeah, I think God wants me to give this to you. Thanks. Wow, warm fuzzies. I'm feeling it. Okay? How much more God that knows what's going on in our heart and mind. Okay, so let's tie into it a little bit. This idea of fragrant offerings is not in this passage. It is, however, in another passage, a really good one. In Philippians, the letter there in chapter 4, he's talking about the support he has received from them. And remember, keep in mind, this should fascinate us. He would not receive help from the church in Corinth, and they were a wealthy church. And the only explanation I can come up with, as I've told you before, is their hearts weren't right. They thought they were all that. They thought they'd already arrived. They believed they had it going on. And it's like, no, I'm not taking anything from y'all. But the poor folks in Macedonia, Philippi, I've received full payment and even more. I'm amply supplied now that I've received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent. They are a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. He is very intentionally pulling off the imagery from particularly Leviticus, as was handed down to Moses, okay, in verse 9 and Leviticus 1. But this goes on. It's actually cited 4 different times just in chapter 1. These burnt offerings that were free will offerings. You were bringing them because it was a thanks to God. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And there were different ones. There were different sized critters. There were big critters and medium-sized critters and birds, depending on what folks could afford. The priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It's to be consumed. It's totally given. It's a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And that is repeated again and again and again. Just even in the first chapter of Leviticus, it is an aroma pleasing to the Lord. That is a great way for us, me included, to look at our giving financially. It's like a sacrifice. It's a giving over of something that wasn't ours to begin with, that we were put in management of. Giving is sharing. Now, you're going to notice right away that we're going to be bringing a lot more material in from the outside. This is going to be almost a topical sermon, even though we are basing out of the passage here. It's described as a sharing. You might recognize the term koinonia, in common. In fact, the reason that the Greek that the New Testament was written in originally is called koine, because koine means common. It was the common language. It was the common Greek. Okay? So koinonia is that fellowship that we are to share in common. And it describes that chapter 15 in Romans. They were pleased to do it. Indeed, they owe it to them. He's talking about, again, folks giving this offering to the folks, the needy in Jerusalem at this point, the Jews. They owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have shared in the Jews' spiritual blessings, they owe it to the Jews to share with them in their material blessings. That word share is koinonia, koinoneo, okay, to share, to have in common. And he's just saying, hey, through Christ, we've become like spiritual descendants, as it says, of Abraham, and we're privy to all those promises. So he says it's not a wrong thing for them to share with the Jews, because the Jews were in need at that time. It wasn't a forever deal. It was because they were in need at that time. So it describes it as this in common, the sharing. Describes it as a service or ministry, diakonia. We get our word deacon from it. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, I testify that the Macedonian churches, including Philippi, gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in the service to the saints. Okay? So you've got a word here that's used, and we would recognize that as deacons. Now, you've actually got the koinonia-based word again here that's used in this passage. So there's a lot of it. It has to do with in common. It's sharing with those who need it at the time. It describes it as a gift. In 2 Corinthians 8:7, just as you all excel in everything, in faith and speech and knowledge and complete earnestness and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace in giving. Okay. And that word charis, it's the same one that's used for the gift that we receive from God, the freely given gift of salvation. But it also was used as just a gift. And he's saying, well, this is a gift. This is the Santa Claus part of it. Well, it's probably better Cheryl's not here. Her business, some years ago, I mean, this is before we even moved down Valley, her business did really well for a couple of years. It just went boom. And in economics, if you have unusual profit, it goes away quickly, typically, unless you've got a monopoly or are paying off a senator, something like that. So, we had more money by far than we'd ever had before. And you know what the funnest part of it was? There were some fun things about it, okay, overall. But the funnest part was, all of a sudden, we, who had started off when I was a Young Life staff guy making $600 a month, and a couple of months it was only a coaching stipend that filled the gap because we didn't have enough money coming in gift-wise to even make that. God provided, don't get me wrong. But there were some really lean times, and all of a sudden, we're the ones who can sit down and say, God, we can plug the gap. We can look at this need. Wow. It was cool. Why? Well, we were gift giving. It's that Santa Claus thing. It wasn't ours to begin with. It was plopped in our laps, and part of wisely using God's resources was, and getting to see the blessing it is, because, of course, to do it right, you want to keep your mouth shut so they don't know where it's coming from. Ideally, you want it to be. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mean to mention this earlier. If you don't know, understand that what you give here, there's one person really that knows, financial secretary. He's the only one that knows about what that is. If it's cash, they don't even know that. We understand that right now the government provides us an opportunity to have a tax benefit, from keeping track of how much you give. Okay, fine. I say take whatever they're willing to give you. But nobody knows. I certainly do not know. Okay, I don't want to know. So understand that is, and financial secretary knows that is absolutely kind of sacred information. That doesn't go anywhere. Janice, you know that. Isn't that true? You've been financial secretary and still helped trades off with Nalise. Okay? It's between you and God, me and God. So that's not public knowledge. We just know bottom lines. So it's a gift. It's described as that. And then one other item to look at is, this is a different word, even though it doesn't come through in some of the English translations. This, again, just says, like the NIV says, this service that you perform is not only supplying the needs of God's people, but it's also overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God. But this word, sir, it's not deacon, okay? It's not diakoneo. It's not that word. It's a different word. We get our liturgos. We get our word liturgy from it. And it has to do with a service that's rendered directly, a ministry rendered directly to those in need. It was often used of priests. And so that's why it's oftentimes defined as a priestly service. So it's almost like this is part of our functioning, as Peter put it, that we are together collectively. God has built a temple out of us. We're a holy people. But we're also described in that letter as the priests that serve there. So this is part of that process too. But it's described as this priestly service. So doesn't this sound good? I mean, it's sharing, it's in common. It's almost like table fellowship. It's like, hey, let's gather up, and you don't have as much food. I've got more food. By the time we finish this meal, we're all going to be full. It's the fellowship itself. It's a service. It's a ministry. It's a priestly ministry. It's a gift. So am I putting the positive spin on it? This is God's word. I'm just pulling these straight out of the Bible. So, he goes on in the second half of verse 1 and says, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. And considering how the tech is working or not this morning, it's a good thing that I didn't try pulling up anything. Because there was a really bad song, just lame, from the 80s called Like an Egyptian. Walk like an Egyptian. Yeah. Okay, well, but I'm saying give like a Galatian. That's where this comes from. So, but it's good that we didn't try to pull any tech in on it, because the way this is going today, it would have blown up. So he is saying that. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. Okay. Now, he goes on to verse 2. On the first day of every week, each of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up. And again, this is an offering. This is not going locally. This is headed for Jerusalem. Okay. But the principles are still good. Setting aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then, when I arrive, I'll give letters of introduction. We'll go into that further. So, just some principles we want to draw to this kind of fairly quickly. And they're going to come two at a time, because I thought I knew how to bring them up one half a line at a time, but I don't. So, first, it's structured. This isn't sloppy. This isn't like I did when I was a brand new believer. It's like, seriously, this is how it was. Well, if I've got some money left over at the end of the month, I'll give it. Now, I think hopefully we all know that in the Old Testament it's lined out pretty clearly that the best and the first goes to God. Now, we are not under the law, and so let's be real clear about this too. Does this mean that if I have no money at all, I've fallen on hard times, and then a mugger just got me and my last $20 bill flew away, that I have to give, or God doesn't like me? No. In fact, I won't I won't ID the person because I didn't ask permission, because I forgot to call. But a tale was told to me recently about time in life where that was kind of like that. And a dear wise woman in the church said, well, then don't give. You know, because your heart's not right anyway. You're being grumbly and ornery. So don't give. You know? And that, I think that's very true, especially if you don't have it. That doesn't mean don't try to be in a different situation for the next month or the next year. But hey, this isn't something where God is saying, now if we're being stupid with what God puts in our management, that's something else. Okay, then we need to straighten up and we need to learn how to fly a little bit different path. But this isn't, God won't like you if you don't do it. But the fact is, he says, no, the first, set it aside right away. Take whatever you have decided in your heart to give and set it aside first. Because it's structured. That's okay. That doesn't make it non-spiritual, by the way. It's inclusive. Because who is he writing this to? Who is this command? He says, on the first day of every week, okay, it's structured. He's saying, do this each week. Each one of you should set aside. Okay, nothing's going to blow up, is it? Really? No, we've got something cut in on our cake. Okay, well, you know what? Let's see if we can work for a second. Okay, it's happening right here. Okay, this is just one of those days. I swear. It's kind of been like this all week long. Okay, so each one of you. It's inclusive. This prevents competitiveness. This prevents, and remember, Jesus, when they were observing the folks at the temple and the rich folks came and went, literally announce it with trumpets, you know, and they throw their cash into the collection horn. And Jesus wasn't a big fan, right? It was when the woman came along with the 2 copper, the lepta, and the bronze, lobbed them in. He said, now there's a giver. There's a giver, because she gave out of her nothing. These other folks gave out of their riches. But it's not competitive, and also everybody can participate. So it's all inclusive. It's not like, well, this is a special club. It's not like, no. If you're God's child and God has provided, then you have not just the responsibility, but you have the opportunity. Okay? It is intentional. You don't say, well, I'll see if I got something left over. Yeah, brilliant, Scott. Brilliant. I told you, I wasn't trained to give. I was trained to save. I had to learn the other one. It is intentional. It's not sloppy. We need to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Okay? First day of every week, which is Sunday, by the way. And we're not going into that discussion, but it seems very clear to me that there was a shift that took place, especially in the Gentile church, because the Lord was raised from the dead on first day, on Sunday, that over time the worship tended, first amongst the Jews it was Sabbath, Saturday, and Sunday, and then shifted to Sunday. So, you know, why is that? Because it's in private, okay, saving it up, he says in verse 2. Okay, just you, each individual sets it aside so that it's there when the actual collection is made for the people in Jerusalem. But you have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's proportional. It says it's according to the income, which it's always been that way. One of the reasons why in Luke, when Luke shares about Jesus being dedicated at the temple when he was 8 days old, which the law called for, good, dutiful parent. That's why he had the right parents. God chose the right parents because they did what was supposed to be done. Well, they brought birds. They did the 2 young doves and pigeons, and that tells us they were poor. Because if you were not poor, you were supposed to bring bigger livestock, just like in Leviticus in chapter 1. Okay? You had the bovines, and you had the sheep or goats, and you had the birds, okay, depending on what you could give. So, again, no competition. It's before God. What are we doing? And the tithe, this 10% deal. This is what blew my mind with my father-in-law. It was good, but it was a difficult concept for me. He said, why stop at 10%? If I can give more, if I want to give more, if I can give more, if I could get excited about giving more. It says 10%, it's not a matter of, oh, well, I don't have to give that much. Well, if we're not under the law of Moses directly, then no, I don't have to. I also don't have to stop there. But it's proportional. It's according to what we have, not according to what we don't have. It's persistent. You keep at it. It's not a one-time deal. What I did it last month. Why? God, you want me to share some of your money back this month too? Okay, he says every week, put it aside. Put it aside. So that it's, now that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be spontaneity. There is a time, a missionary makes a presentation and God just gives you the punch to the ribs and says, says, wouldn't you like to give? Yeah. Wouldn't you like to give a bunch? Yeah. Okay, well then be spontaneous as long as it's not foolish. But there is a need, again, for this persistent type of giving. It's ongoing. And it's prepared. He's saying we don't want to show up, and he's clearer about this in 2 Corinthians in chapters 8 and 9. As he says, it's really going to, basically, I'm paraphrasing, it's going to look really bad if these folks show up and you don't have what you said you were going to have. So, be wise and take care of it. But it is a matter of being prepared so that we aren't constantly letting this kind of surprise us. Oh, I forgot. Well, I shouldn't forget. So that is a brief rundown, some thoughts, just some thoughts. Like I said, this is a very different message, from me. But verse 3 talks about some of these best practices. That's what they would call it in the business world. That there are certain things that you should do if you want to succeed. In fact, we were kind of talking a little bit about this earlier, Renee and I. And some things that you should avoid completely. And it's the same here. And totally above board, completely loaded with integrity. It says some of these best practices. The first thing, well, Paul shows that he's a man of letters. A little different meaning of it. Then, verse 3, when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men that you approve, you all approve, and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. Paul isn't going to tell them how it is. He isn't going to say, hey, hand over the cash and I'll get it there. He said, no, you choose the folks. They will take it, folks that you trust and you want to do this job. Okay? And he says, I will furnish them with the letter so that they will be readily accepted and the folks will know, the recipients will know that this is legitimate. And send them with your gift to Jerusalem. Okay? They need to meet your approval. It is your deal, your giving, your choice. But also, he says, I might do a ride-along. I was hoping for a ride-along yesterday with Dan Anderson. He's been totally snowed it's been such a weird year and with the hay. And they finished their first cutting so late that they started the second cutting the next day. There was So we had set up a ride-along in the swather for yesterday afternoon. He called yesterday morning and said, well, the day went sideways on me. And that means if Dan says the day went sideways, that means that there was a mushroom cloud over their shop and stuff. That's what it means, because he's very measured. It's amazing. I could not be a farmer, I don't think. So I didn't get to do the ride along, but something was happening. He was doing something already, and it's the perfect opportunity to sit in the little training seat, they call it, and you ride along, and you visit. You get the time. You spend the time. It's a great opportunity. Essentially, I think Paul is doing that when he says in verse 4, if it seems advisable for me to go also, they'll accompany me. But I'm still not taking your stuff. I'll just, we'll go together. We'll do this thing collectively. And especially with as dangerous as the travel was in those days, pretty good idea. Okay. Now just the briefest, of approaches on these verses, 5 through 9. After I go through Macedonia, I will come back to y'all, for I will be going through Macedonia. Perhaps I'll stay with you a while, or even spend the winter there, so that you can help me on my journey wherever I go. I do not want to see you now and make only a passing visit. This is all clear enough. He's like, hey, I don't just want to do a drop-in. I want to actually camp out with you for a while. I hope to spend some time with you if the Lord permits. But I will stay on at Ephesus until Pentecost, the 50th day from Passover, because a great door for effective work has opened to me, and there are many who oppose me. Now, I want you to take a good look at verse 9. It would make much more sense to me if he said, well, a great door for effective work is open to me, and there are none that oppose me. That's what makes sense to me. That's what I want to hear. That's not what he says. And that's the one verse that I want to go. He's talking about Ephesus, and he did go to Acts and read chapter 19. Oh, he had some tough times in Ephesus. But he spent a long time there, too. But you Willie Booger. Okay, it's not there. It's all right. I know where it is. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16. Be very careful then how y'all live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. I think there's quite a reflection of that here in chapter 16 in the letter to the church in Corinth. I'm going to stay at Ephesus until Pentecost because a great door for effective work is open to me. There are many who oppose me. And I just want to say this about that. World's going pretty haywire, eh? In case you hadn't noticed, and I don't know what rock you'd be living under to even not be aware of that. But in every sense, nothing like this has ever happened. A shutdown of an economy worldwide. And I could so easily go post it. We're just not going there. Not today. The fact is it has happened. It's never happened before. We have not begun to see the ramifications. And we've got folks funding, riots in our cities. I don't care where you fall politically. When pallets of bricks are delivered, just fell out of the sky for rioters to grab and bust stuff up. These are interesting times. Pray for revival. Folks need Jesus, and we need to be listening and following Jesus. But in the midst of this whole thing, the more chaotic things get, the greater will be the draw for some folks. As I sat over here in this corner with some folks a few weeks ago, during the week we had a visit, and the reason that they had spiritual interest, they stated directly, was everything's chaos. Nobody knows right from wrong anymore. Indeed, which John alluded to already. Okay, we've lost our moorings. Okay, we're drifting. But the more that occurs, the more some folks will be shaken and their worldview will be challenged. And so there will be a more openness to seeking out what truth actually is. Not everyone, but since we don't know who they are, then we need to look at everybody as a potential person to befriend and share truth with. And that doesn't mean it has to be immediate, remember? But that's for another message. Okay? Love people, impart truth. That's ministry. And it takes a lot of different forms. Okay, that's all I want to say about that is that Ephesus, there was a lot of trouble and there was a lot of opportunity. And he was telling the Ephesians, take advantage of it because there's evil. There's opportunity. All right, as parting shot, this is one that you're familiar with, undoubtedly, if you're familiar with this money issue at all, because it's one of the most popular of the passages. Again, 2 Corinthians. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. That does not mean that if you give all your money, God's going to make you richer. It's not what it means. But it does mean, again, concerning our heart, the heart condition, that there is a reflection of it. But this is not karma. Okay? The living God can't be manipulated like that. You put so many coins in the slot, I'm going to give you the jackpot. No, it's not. But generously, because that comes out in all facets of life. And if we're stingy, that's going to come out in all facets of life too. Each man, here we are again, individually should give what he's decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And does anybody remember what word? We get a word from the original Greek that's translated cheerful here. Hilarious. Hilaros. And it doesn't mean idiotic laughter. Okay, it's talking about happy, even more so than makarios, than blessed or happy in the Sermon on the Mount. It has to do with just good cheer, just having a good attitude. It's not joy, and it's not deep, abiding, blessed happiness like makarios. It's hilarious. It is just happy. I'm glad to do it, sir, is the attitude. I think for myself, that's how I picture it. It's, Lord, glad to do it, especially since it's your money anyway. So attitude, it's all about the heart. Give what, with God, you've decided in your heart to give. That may be more next week, maybe less next week. I don't know what it is, but generosity is encouraged in all of our life, in every aspect. But whatever between God and ourselves we settle out with, do get it settled in your heart. And then you give like you mean it. When I was younger, okay, possibly rumors have it that maybe there was a physical altercation a time or two. We used to call them fights. And if somebody couldn't hit hard, they kind of, like, seriously? Today, or at least more recently, we say, is that all you got? Hit me like you mean it. Do whatever you do like you mean it if you're a believer. If it's not sin, do it like you mean it. Do it like you really intend to have some impact. And if we're going to give, same way. Get it settled out with God in your heart and then do it like you mean it. And with an attitude that can say, glad to do it, Daddy. Glad to do it. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for what you have given us. Your word says that you give every good gift. Every good gift comes from above. And you're more aware than we are of how broken this world is. But not forever. A new heaven, a new earth, a new resurrection body, eternity with you. We can't outdo the offer that you've made us. And we can never outgive you. So give us good hearts. Give us hearts that reflect what Jesus is building into us as individuals, as a people. And in this case, may our giving financially reflect that. Not because you're impressed, because you'll never be impressed with our pitiful little attempts, but you are pleased. You are pleased, like the daddy who gives tuppence to the little daughter so that she can get you a gift. We're just giving back a little bit of what you've given us. So may we do it like we mean it, and may we do it with love. May we do it in Jesus' name and for his sake.